In the original 2006 New York Times review of Doris Kearns Goodwin's now best-selling book, Team of Rivals, critic James McPherson wrote this, quote, "More books about Abraham Lincoln line the shelves of libraries than about any other American. Can there be anything new to say about our 16th president? Surprisingly, the answer is yes." Tomorrow marks 20 years since the release of Doris's award-winning, massively influential account of the Lincoln presidency. President Obama said it was his pick for the one book he'd keep with him on a desert island. Here to celebrate the anniversary and to put today in the context of Lincoln is Pulitzer Prize-winning author herself, Doris Kearns Goodwin. She'll be at the Brookline Booksmiths on Tuesday, November 4th, to discuss the paperback edition of her kids' book, The Leadership Journey. Doris, it's great to see you, and happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Doris Kearns Goodwin, for the one or two people who may not know what Team of Rivals meant in terms of Abraham Lincoln, explain it.
Well, I think what was so important about Lincoln, which is why I did the Team of Rivals, is the night he won the election, he couldn't sleep. He realized what he didn't know. He'd only had one term in Congress. The country's falling apart. A civil war is about to begin. So before he woke up, he decided, I'm putting my three chief rivals into my cabinet, Seward, Chase, and Bates. Each one thought he was smarter than Lincoln. Each one was more celebrated. Each one was more educated. And each one thought he should be president instead of Lincoln. And his friends came to him and said, Lincoln, you can't do this. You're going to look like a figurehead. He said, the country is in peril. These are the strongest and most able men in the country. I need them by my side. How important is that, right? And then Lyndon Johnson might have put the same concept in less noble language. He liked to say, it's better to have your enemies inside the tent pissing out than outside the tent pissing in. That was not as noble a way of saying it. But it was so important because it meant that every day he had dissenting opinions right there with him. They could argue with him. They could question his assumptions. And he was able eventually to bring them into a team. That's why the weirdness of a team of rivals, because he shared credit and he shouldered blame and he treated them with kindness and he paid attention to each one of them and they formed a team.
But wasn't there
shared credit and shouldered blame. Yeah.
Wasn't there a strategic element to this too? I mean, the notion, it's sort of the LBJ approach where he said it more crassly, but was that part of the motivation of Lincoln as well?
I think so. I think he did really need them because the North was split into factions. There was radicals who wanted emancipation immediately. There were conservatives who never wanted it, just the Union restored, and there were people in the middle. These three guys represented each of those factions. So if he could keep them together when the time came for the Emancipation Proclamation, then he could keep the country together.
Why did they agree to it? In light of the fact that they thought that they were superior to him and he was their boss, why did these men say, I'll serve this guy?
That's a great question, Jim. I think because they knew the country was in peril too, and they were patriots. And even though they thought they were better from him at the beginning, after only like 6 weeks, Seward writes to his wife saying, Lincoln's the best of us all. I misunderestimated him, as President Bush would say.
So you've got so many good stories about putting together this book, and you talked about telling Steven Spielberg before the movie was made about Lincoln that a Lincoln scholar, had told you, I believe his name is David Donald from Lincoln, told you you'd be a better person for studying Lincoln. And when you passed that along to Spielberg, what did he tell you?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, that is true. David Donald was the Lincoln scholar. He lived on Lincoln Road in Lincoln, Massachusetts, and there he was.
That's great.
And he took me aside when I started. He said, you will feel, as you say, a better person for having lived with him. Everybody feels that way. I told Spielberg that, and I told Daniel Day-Lewis that, and each one of them came to me afterward and said they did. The reason is that Lincoln had this feeling that if you allowed the normal human emotions that we all have, envy, jealousy, anger, to stay within you, to fester, they'll poison you. And so every time one of those emotions come, and any one of us, we talked about that afterwards, we just say, Lincoln would say, what good does jealousy do? What good does envy do? There's a sense in which it's not just what he did, it's but who he was. I mean, for example, he had a man named Edwin Stanton who later became his Secretary of War, and they had been in a legal case together in the 1850s, and Stanton had humiliated Lincoln. He saw him, and he was going to be his partner in this law case, and he couldn't bear the idea that somebody looking like Lincoln did, a stain on his shirt, his short sleeves not fitting his long arms. He said to his partners, we have to lose this long-armed ape. He cannot be part of this case. Lincoln was so humiliated, but when it came time to appoint a second Secretary of War, because the first one had failed, everybody said, Edwin Stanton's the man for the job. And he said, well, then he's coming in. And the two of them became such good friends that Stanton said he ended up loving him more than anyone outside his family. But how do you forget that kind of hurt? And not everybody can, but it's so important to do so.
An anonymous texter, Doris, has a very good question. Does Doris Kearns Goodwin think that her book inspired President Obama to make Hillary Clinton Secretary of State?
Well, it's a funny story. I mean, he did read the book while he was in the campaign before he beat Hillary Clinton. And when he actually won the nomination, somebody said to him, would you really be willing to put into your cabinet somebody who was a rival and whose husband was an occasional pain in the butt? And meaning, of course, Clinton and Hillary. And he did do that. And he went back to remember that from Lincoln. But then the funniest thing was the night of the inauguration, I was down there for television, and I was at a party where Hillary was, and she had already been named his Secretary of State. And she came up to me, you're responsible for my being Secretary of State. Not
great.
Me, but Lincoln. But I think he understood. He loved Lincoln. Obama did.
So we only have a minute till a break, and then you're going to stay with us till the top of the hour. Are you a better person because of this?
I'd like to think so. Yes,
How?
I really do.
How?
I mean, I think just the idea that he had compassion, he had kindness, he had ambition for something larger than himself. Most importantly, he had humility, he had empathy. I'd like to think that humility of acknowledging your errors and learning from your mistakes, which he did over and over again, is something you can keep growing on the rest of your life.
I know. Don't look at me, Marjorie. I know.
Okay. No,
I know what you're thinking.
Didn't say a word.
I know what you're thinking. Some people are better people than others. What can I say?
Okay.
Oh, I think Lincoln would say you're okay.
I
Tim.
don't think so, but thank you
No,
for
he is okay.
saying that.
He's
How does it
definitely
feel, by the
okay.
way? We got to take a break. How does it feel on the 20th anniversary of this epic work? How
I mean,
you
it
feeling?
took me so many years to write the book. It took me 8 years. Then it took 10 years for the movie to be made. And then I made a documentary on television about it. So I've been living with Lincoln longer than anyone except for my husband. So it's great that he's still around and I'm still around.
Indeed.
We're talking with historian Doris Kearns Goodwin.
great.
We're going to keep talking to her after this quick break. I'm Marjorie Egan. He is Jim Browdy. You're listening to BPR at the BPL, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're also on NEPM.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, in under 8 minutes, thieves stole the crown jewels in broad daylight from the Louvre. How did they pull it off, and what does this say about cracks in security at museums worldwide? Plus, from Simply Ballroom to Bigly Ballroom, we'll look at Trump's ever-expanding East Wing makeover. We take on that and more on The Culture Show's Week in Review. That's today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, offering PPO and HMO Medicare Advantage plans with a broad network of doctors and hospitals. BlueCrossMA.com/go. And Revolutionary Valley. On April 19th, 1775 in Lexington and Concord, the first shots of the Revolution rang out. This is the heart of Revolutionary Valley. RevolutionaryValley.org. Funded in part by the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism.
Welcome back to BPR and GBH and NEPM. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Top of the hour from noon to 1, Mayor Wu will join us, Michelle Wu, for Ask the Mayor, taking our questions and yours. If you're just joining us, we're speaking with presidential historian and local treasure, Pulitzer Prize winner Doris Kearns Goodwin. 20 years ago tomorrow, released Team of Rivals, best-selling book about a man who will go on to be praised. Listen to this carefully. As the second or third best president, according to the current president, who claims to be the best ever. Here he is.
Somebody went up there, they say, you're the third best president in the United States. This was on television, third best. And they said, who are the first two? George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. And I got extremely angry at this man. You know, you can't, it's going to be tough to beat, Mr. Senator. It's going to be, John, it's going to be very tough to beat Washington and Lincoln, but we're going to give it a try, right? Hey, they didn't put out 8 wars, 9 coming, all right? We put out 8 wars, and the 9th is coming, believe it or not.
Oh, Doris Kearns Goodwin needs to be resuscitated. That said, Pulitzer Prize-winning author Doris Kearns Goodwin will continue. By the way, she's at the Brookline Booksmith on Tuesday, November 4th, to talk about the paperback edition of her terrific kids' book, The Leadership Journey.
You know, I'm really glad you played that clip because the contrast is very evident in how Abraham Lincoln handled the Confederacy when they surrendered. Tell us about that and about Robert E. Lee and the day of the surrender and all that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the most extraordinary part of Lincoln's empathy. At the end of the Appomattox was about to happen, and people wanted to prosecute the Confederate generals and the Confederate officers and hang them, have trials. They felt the need for vindictiveness, for retribution, and there was a lot of pressure on him. And Lincoln said no, and enough lives have been lost. We have to move forward. I want no bloody work, no prosecutions. But the day that Robert E. Lee was surrendering, he wore his sword and his best outfit. He thought he would be going to jail that night. And of course, it didn't happen. And Grant and Lee had a great degree of respect for one another. And Lincoln just decided, I'll even let the people go home and take their guns with them if they need them on their farms, take their horses with them if they need it. We are moving forward. That is a mark of a president. Lack of vindictiveness, lack of retribution, moving forward.
How about this song that was played? How about the song that Lincoln chose to have played, or songs he chose to have played at the White House?
Oh, great. So this is great also. So people would come and serenade him, of course, when Appomattox was signed, and the war was at an end. There were fireworks all around Washington, all around the country, and he just said, you know, I'd like to play a couple songs. Of course, they'd play Yankee Doodle Dandy, but I'd like to play Dixie.
That's incredible.
I'd like to be that's their song, but it's our song. It's our country song. So the idea that they could sing the song of the South, of course, it fits with his second inaugural, with Malice Toward None and Charity for All, Let Us Bind Up the Nations, even bringing their song into our lives again.
You know, Harry in Hadley, Mass. texts an interesting question. He wants to know what you think were Lincoln's weaknesses or faults, because we know his, or most of us know how great he was, but what did he get wrong?
That's really interesting. I think the very strength he had of empathy for people, he always wanted to give somebody a second chance, so that if they hadn't done right at the beginning, a second chance. Now, that was worked out well when he gave soldiers a pardon for having fallen asleep in duty, and they would have been hung, to let them go back in the army and have a second chance. It also did not work out well with General McClellan, who should have been fired much, much earlier. He kept thinking, he'll come through, and he never did come through, and he finally had to go. So I think sometimes you could be too lenient with people around you if you want them to be better.
Well, wasn't McClellan one of the kind of Ivy League boys that wouldn't fight? Was that, I remember that story.
Well, he never moved. I mean, he would say to him, you know, you've arranged a great army, it's disciplined, but it never moves, it's just standing there. It's supposed to go forward in battle.
Okay.
You know, when I'm looking at the crowd, and by the way, the crowd is huge today, and I know you won't like this, but you're here, which is, and Mayor Wu is too, by the way. So, and it's in part because you are who you are, which I know you won't like either, but I hope it also means that people care more about history than I know Marjorie and I worry they do. Do you think it's a piece of the action here?
You know, I think one of the things that I found so rewarding, because I am worried about history being diminished in schools and people not studying it in the same way, but whenever I go where there's people here, what they really want to believe is what I believe, that history is giving us hope. We've talked about that on the show before, that somehow if you look at how we got through the Great Depression, how we got through the Civil War, how we got through World War II, and the people living then, as we've often said, didn't know the end of their story like we don't know the end of our story. But history gives you perspective. We got through them. The Allies won World War II. The Depression came to an end with the mobilization. The Civil War produced the Union and emancipation. And if we think that our ancestors came through, we can come through too. It's up to us. And I think that's why people are here. I'm so glad to know that.
So before, in a minute, we're going to get to what we called yesterday, Team of No Rivals. We'll do that in a second. But before we do, we mentioned, based on the texter, Barack Obama maybe taking a lesson from your book and picking Hillary Clinton. You mentioned the guy you were very close to, LBJ's experience. Did other presidents take a page from this?
I think what we've seen in a lot of recent presidents is every now and then a Secretary of Defense or Secretary of State might be from another party, but it's been much less frequent. I think it's partly because the party lines are so polarized right now that when you do take it as a position, if a Republican goes into a Democratic, they may get seen as a traitor in their own party. Right. We've got to come back to that. It's so important that people don't have people around saying, oh, you're president, you're wonderful, you're the best we've ever seen. No, you've got problems, sir, and I'll tell you what they are.
So before we get to tearing down the East Wing, where you spent some time and can tell us about, people are, I think, I know I am, really stunned and upset because it seems like every day things are getting worse and worse, and no one is standing up except for Jimmy Kimmel and the guys on late night TV to the president. I mean, these schools this week did say they weren't going to go on bended knee to his ridiculous requirements that he wanted to make.
Led by Sally Kornbluth right down
Yes,
the street at
indeed.
MIT,
Yes, for her.
we should say. Yes.
But where do we find the hope? Because it seems to many President Trump is not being stopped.
I think we still have to find the hope in the citizens. I mean, every social change that's come in our country has come from the ground up. It was, as Lincoln was called a liberator after the Emancipation Proclamation, he said, don't call me that. It was the anti-slavery movement that did it all, and the Union soldiers. Now, it took decades for that movement to work. Then we have the civil rights movement, the women's movement, the gay rights movement. We saw millions of people come out in last weekend to march.
Yeah.
We saw the impact that the boycott made of Disney on Kimmel going back to his channel. And as a result of the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955, when Rosa Parks didn't go to the back of the bus, and she was then arrested, and Martin Luther King came, and they boycotted the buses in Montgomery, and they integrated the bus system, and then the civil rights movement moved forward with freedom riders and marches, and then civil rights happened in 1964. It takes time, but when the citizens are aroused, we're going to be fine, and I think they're aroused.
So Doris Kearns Goodwin, there's this story, I don't remember where, it was either in the New York Times or the Washington Post, talking about Congress abrogating its responsibility, and they go down the list. We talk about it every day, so we don't have to recite it. Is there an historical precedent for that, where there has been such power relentlessly ceded to the chief executive?
No, clearly during wars, more power is ceded to him, but not in this relentless way that it has been. Now, Congress fights back. They have a fighting spirit, usually.
And I assume well, I don't know, I shouldn't assume anything. What's your analysis? Just fear of Trump? Is that?
Somehow they are all in it together. It's a very odd thing. Every now and then somebody pops up and says something different, and maybe that'll just keep happening. You need a number of people. You know, if one person on a bus is being hurt, and then if 3 people come to their side, then suddenly the whole bus comes to their side.
Well, that's the analysis, by the way, of the universities. When a handful, almost all those who were offered that's compact, Kornbluth again started. Brown, which had capitulated on something, stood up to this.
You need other people to be courageous, and then you can go together as a group.
But you know what has stunned me? The level of lying is so brazenly. I mean, the Speaker of the House, Johnson, keeps getting up there and pretending that the reason that not signing in this new congresswoman that was elected from Arizona is not about the Epstein files. I mean, you know he's lying when they're trying to say that the Medicaid cuts are all about preventing health care from going illegal. They're lying, and it's got the president lies, the vice president lies, the Speaker of the House lies, in a blatant way that anybody who's paying much attention would know is a lie. That's what I find so shocking. The press secretary, Carolyn Levitt, is lying every day to an extraordinary degree, like brazen.
And I think what happens is people become numb to it after a while. You know, you're used to it. Oh, yes, what you're all saying. We can't become numb to it. We have to somehow know in our own souls what's right and what's wrong and what's factual and what's not factual. And the social media being split now, and the channels being split, and stations, you know, with different kinds of facts, not only different opinions. We're getting much too used to this accommodation, and we shouldn't be.
So Doris Kearns Goodwin, you've spent obviously time in that building, a lot of time in that building in your life. When you first saw the images that we all saw of the East Wing beginning to be rubble, what'd you feel? What'd you think?
I mean, it was a sad thing to just see. I mean, worried about not only what's going to be built there, the ballroom. Why we need that huge ballroom is beyond me. They had beautiful tents on the lawn, which I've been to great state dinners at. There's rooms in the East Room that had the Nobel Prize winning dinner, which was the dinner at Camelot with JFK. That was plenty of room for the people there. But I think the most important thing, I've been looking back through history at other renovations that took place. Yeah. So when Lincoln was there, Mary Todd wanted to make the White House better. So she got $20,000 from the Congress to appropriate, and she bought new rugs, and she bought new paint in the walls she replaced with wallpaper. And then she went over it by $6,000. And she had to come to Lincoln to say, well, you asked for another $6,000. He said, do you think I'm going to go to the Congress and ask for $6,000 for, he called them flub dubs, meaning the interior decorating when there's soldiers who don't have enough blankets in the winter. So is that like today? Incredibly, right? And then Teddy Roosevelt does the hugest renovation.
What did he do?
Well, what happened is that they didn't have a separate West Wing when he was there. So if you were in the family, you had 5 bedrooms, and right next to the bedrooms was the president's office, the cabinet room, offices of the staff. So they're running right into each other. So he decided, well, I've got these 6 kids coming, and I've got pets and dogs and goats and kangaroos coming in, so I need a West Wing. So they got him the West Wing, but then inside that West Wing, one day he saw the press huddling outside in the rain. He decided they need a press room inside the West Wing. So what a different relationship with the press that was, right? So then comes FDR, and they make a pool for him because of his polio, the March of Dimes and donations, and that pool stays for a long period of time. Later, it gets not run over, they put a cover over it so that they can have a press briefing room. That happens under Nixon. And then there's bowling alleys that come and go. But then Truman has the biggest renovation at all. The White House was evidently dissolving when he got there. They told him the foundation wasn't strong, that you were walking on the floors and they were tipping. They thought they heard ghosts. That was just signs of deterioration of the White House. So we had to move out of the White House for an entire 4 years in order for the foundation to be built and the whole interior on a steel frame. And that cost something. He was terrified. It cost $6 million then, which is like $60 million today, but still $60 million versus $350 million for a ballroom.
So far.
And so far. And then when Eisenhower comes in, he puts in a 3,000-foot putting green on the outside so he can putt. But the funny story my husband tells, when he went to the White House Oval Office as a young campaign manager, now he's a young staffer, for the first time he meets John Kennedy in there, and John Kennedy says, look at these pockmarks on the floor. What do you think they are? And Dick said, well, maybe they're J. Edgar Hoover's listening devices. And JFK says, no, Ike used to put his cleats on the desk here, and then he'd walk out to the putting room and he left those marks on. But wait till you. So then JFK says, well, I guess we all have our own means of relaxation. At least mine won't leave pockmarks on the floor.
Yikes.
That's a good one. He was speaking of the ladies, I presume?
Who knows what he was speaking of?
Who knows what he was speaking of? And then you go on this thing, talk about how Trump did some updates in the first time around too, which were reasonable. The HVAC system and electrical stuff and that sort of thing. This was a real departure because no one has torn down anything in the White House before.
No, the real worry that I've heard some people say is there's such a beautiful symmetry to the White House with the West Wing and the East Wing, and evidently this is going to destroy the symmetry. The great thing about the White House is that it's not Versailles. It's a simple house. It's really a house where these people live. And as Lincoln said, I think he's attributed to the people's house, but what he meant by that, he talked to the soldiers in 1864. He said, I'm just a temporary resident of this house, but what matters is what this house stands for. And the house stands for the fact that it is where the people come, and it's where we have a free chance for any father's child can come here as my father's child did, knowing that he came from a very troubled background.
People, when we were talking about this construction thing, and the reason we talked about it for a couple of days was because it's interesting, and I know you know this, of all the things Trump has done or not done, the thing which has caused the lowest approval rating from the public is this. Only 24% of the people who are the ultimate diehards. And so several people texted in the last 2 days and said, my fear about this is he plans not to be a temporary occupant, that he plans to be a long-term occupant. Steve Bannon said yesterday, people know who Steve Bannon is, he will definitely serve a third term. There are ways around the 22nd Amendment. And the fear I've had, we've asked Judge Gertner, people a lot of big-time lawyers, they all say, essentially, don't worry. I fear that the Supreme Court says they didn't mean more than 2 terms. They meant more than 2 terms serially, not non-consecutively. And since he hasn't served 2 terms consecutively, he can do 1 more. Is that a naive fear?
I don't know. So many things I would definitely have said to you 6 months ago or a year ago. That's naive. It'll never happen. He'll go away. I don't know. There's also a bunker underneath this thing that he is now demolishing that's going to be strengthened. And nobody knows quite what that's going to be. That's some big bunker underneath that originally FDR put in.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I've just been reading about that. So But I don't know. I mean, I still think the system is such. We've got to believe in the system. I mean, just remember, think of what it was like when Lincoln first took office. He said if he'd ever known what those first 3 months were going to be like, with 7 states seceding from the Union, a civil war beginning, he could not have thought he could have lived through it. Most people didn't think they could live through the Civil War. They did. We're living through this. It's not getting better, but there's signs of vitality. I think you're right with the universities, with the law firms, with people on the streets, and people know what's right. People know what's wrong. We got to trust that.
Well, I mentioned Carolyn Leavitt before. She's the press secretary. Someone asked her whether, East Wing today, the Washington Monument next, and then I thought of you and Abraham Lincoln, and I wonder if you think Lincoln is precariously positioned in the middle of the Lincoln Memorial. They might haul him out there and replace him with, or Mount Rushmore.
Well, no, that's certainly a goal, I suspect, but I don't know. Let's just take pride in what's happened in these last couple of weeks. I really do think that we're beginning to see some movement. And when citizens start moving, as Lincoln said, public sentiment is everything. Without it, nothing is possible. With it, everything is. And that's why I think it's important what you say. Public sentiment has risen up. They saw the bulldozing. There's something about that site. This is our house. It's our house. It's not, these are temporary. That's what Lincoln said. I'm a temporary resident in this house. And of course they have to make renovations. It's a house. It's been there for 200 years and it was falling apart as it was with Truman. And that's completely understandable. Or they might want a gym, or they might want a theater, and they might want a little putting green. All of that is fine. But this is the structure of the house that's been taken down. A whole part of that with all the memories in it. Lots of things happened in that East Wing.
No, it was a visceral thing. Like I saw it, it made me very upset and very sad, even though I've only been there once in my life, 1,000,000 years ago.
Well, it's also because it's a metaphor for everything he's done.
It is. It's a metaphor for just, I'm just going to knock this thing down, and the wiring and the asbestos and all the debris and the dust, and it just was really, it kind of got you in the gut.
And I guess the question is, too, if he had told us why he needed this, or what was important, or where were the offices that were once in the East Wing going to go? I mean, I don't even know what's going to happen to them. Not just the First Lady's office, but there were certain security offices, lots of other offices there. Then maybe we would have understood. You have to persuade public why this is necessary. There's something about the Gilded Age, which I'm working on right now with Teddy Roosevelt and the Gilded Age. They loved these big drawing rooms. A lot of these people's mansions in New York would have the drawing room like a quarter of the house, because then they could show their wealth to the people who could come, the 1,000 people who could come and visit their drawing room. So they'd have to persuade us, why is it important to have this drawing room? At least if he'd made the attempt to say that, why this ballroom mattered, then we might have understood. But instead, it just got knocked down, and we're left with the rubble already there.
So every time you're here, you preempted me ending our discussion, which we do every time, about why do you have hope, and you did it. However, here's my however. We only have a minute left. You talk a lot about the people, which I love, sort of rising up. But in all these moments in history, when we did rise up to stop the kind of oppression that we're seeing now, there were leaders that partnered with. We don't have that right now, do we?
Well, maybe we do, but they're not necessarily on the national scale. I bet you there's leaders in cities, there's leaders in states, there's leaders in school boards going on. And some one of those, look, nobody knew who Lincoln was before he ran for office. They called him Abram. And he said he had to tell the people, my name is Abraham. Would that be okay to call me by the right name?
Plus he had lost.
Plus he had
Obama
lost again and again and again. Yeah. And how did we know Obama until a few years before he was president? There are people out there. The only worry is you've got to hope that people are still willing to go into public service. It's harder now. Your life is going to be exposed. You have to raise all that money. You can get gerrymandered. We have to just that's what we need. We need a whole new generation to believe again in the system.
Okay, before you go, raise your right hand and say, I really mean this when I say I have hope.
I really, really mean this when I say I have hope. History tells me so.
The better angels will
Doris,
prevail.
Nobody we like talking to more than you.
Me too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming in, Doris Kearns Goodwin. Really appreciate it. We have been speaking with Pulitzer Prize-winning author Doris Kearns Goodwin. Her best-selling Team of Rivals celebrates 20 years tomorrow. It's hard to believe it's been 20 years.